everyone. Brick City Brown Chick coming at you with another episode. And for my short this week, I need to talk about something that's been a huge topic of conversation among content creators for the last week or so. And when I first heard about it, I thought, nah, that's not possible. And the more I heard people talk about it, the more I thought, oh no, that makes perfect sense. And it is the concept of Black Americans as immigrants. What has come to the forefront in the last few weeks with all the ICE activity and deportations, people have started talking about why a majority of Latino and Hispanic people voted for the current occupant of the White House. Why is that? Because for a lot of us, myself included, it makes absolutely no sense. Why would you vote for someone who flat out said, we're going to do mass deportations? And I don't care about you. I only care about your vote. Why in the world would you vote for someone like that as a person of color? So many of us have just been baffled by the whole concept. But what has come out in recent days is the understanding that many Hispanic and Latino people here in the United States think that Black Americans, and I mean those of us whose ancestry goes back to slavery, so not people who've come here from the Caribbean or from Africa in recent years, but those of us who have been here for generations are immigrants. And I just thought, that's crazy. How does anyone think that those of us who are descendants of people who were dragged here and enslaved are immigrants? And so that took me down the rabbit hole this week of listening to a lot of different content creators and commentary from Hispanic and Latino people who've said that this is what they have been taught, both by white people and by their fellow Hispanic people, and why they thought that when he was running for election, the current president said, I'm going to do mass deportations. They honestly and sincerely thought that what he meant was he was going to start with the Black people, because to them, we are immigrants. Just incredible to me. If you know even the least amount possible about how Black people got to this country, you would understand that it was not through an immigration process. So I've heard people yell and scream the last week about how stupid these people are, and this is what Google is for, and you could just look this up and know that's not true. But I wanted to take a different perspective. I wanted to approach this from the viewpoint of all of us learning, right? So if you are a person that believes Black people in America are immigrants, please listen to this episode extra carefully. So Black people were first brought to what would become the United States in the year 1619. And if that sounds familiar, it might be because a journalist and professor named Nikole Hannah Jones developed a book and a lesson plan and later a documentary called the 1619 Project, which traces the origins of Black people in America. So the United States became a country, famously, in 1776. So if you do a little math, you know that we were brought here more than 100 years before the United States became a country. So that's the first piece. If you look up the word immigrant in the dictionary, it says people who choose to move to a different country for relocation purposes. In other words, people who make the choice to leave their country of origin or whatever country they currently live in to go to another country to start a different or new life. That is not what Black people did. Black people were taken from Africa in chains and bondage and brought to what would become the United States, and they were enslaved. Now, I really never thought as a grown woman I would have to explain what the word enslaved means, but just humor me for a second because there seems to be a lot of words that people use that they don't understand. Enslaved means you are property. It means you belong to a master who owns you and your labor and can have you do all sorts of tasks. In the case of Black people, it was a lot of field work and picking cotton and crops and being maids and wet nurses to white people's children, all those kinds of things without payment. That is what enslavement is. So Black people did not immigrate to America. We were forced here, and then we were enslaved. Now, what changed that for the United States and for Black people specifically is a document called the Emancipation Proclamation, which was issued by the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. And what the Emancipation Proclamation does, just boiling it down, is free the slaves. It made slavery no longer legal in the United States. The Emancipation Proclamation was followed up by 3 amendments to the Constitution, which collectively are called the Reconstruction Amendments. They are Amendment 13, 14, and 15. The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution abolishes slavery in the United States. So after the 13th Amendment was ratified by Congress, slavery in the United States became illegal. The 14th Amendment covers equal protection under law for all Americans, not just for white men, which was essentially who the Constitution was originally written for, but for all people. The 15th Amendment is specifically about citizenship and repopulation. What is an American citizen? What defines who is an American citizen. That is what the 15th Amendment covers. So 13, 14, 15, abolish slavery, representation in Congress, and also equal protection under law. Now, your question at this point might be, if those amendments do those three things, why were later acts of Congress and laws needed to have what is spelled out in these amendments? So, for example, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the 20th Amendment, women's right to vote. Why were those needed if these amendments did those things? The answer to that is some states, mostly southern states, the states that seceded from the Union in the Confederacy that caused the Civil War, those states began writing laws after the Reconstruction amendments to say, we're going to find a way around this so that Black people still can't vote, so that they are not represented in Congress, so that women can't vote. So the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act and the 20th Amendment, all of those things became necessary because states chose to fight the Reconstruction amendments. So that is how Black people in America, whose ancestors were dragged here and enslaved, became full United States citizens. So those of us who can trace our ancestry back 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 generations are birthright citizens. What does birthright citizenship mean? That phrase has been tossed around for the first 6 months of this administration. What does that mean? It simply means because you are born here, because you are born in the United States, you are automatically a United States citizen. So how does that play out with immigration? If you have a couple who moves here from, I don't know, let's say the Congo. Let's just use that as an example. Let's say they move here from the Congo, and the husband and wife are going through the citizenship process. They're going through the paperwork, they're going through the interviews, they're doing all of the things you have to do to become a naturalized citizen. What does that mean? That means America, the United States, is not your country of origin, but you have chosen to become a United States citizen. So as the parents are going through the process to become naturalized citizens, they get pregnant and have a child. That child is an American citizen because they were born here. That is regardless of their parents' citizenship. Now, what this administration seems hell-bound and determined to do is to change the concept of birthright citizenship. They want to be able to say, if the parents are not American citizens, then their child is also not an American citizen. That is going to require fundamental changes to the Constitution. Now, I know the administration is running around acting like they can just make this decision, but they can't. It is going to require congressional approval. And to add a new amendment to the Constitution is a very long arduous and complicated process. All the states have to meet. There has to be a 2/3 agreement. It is not something you can just snap your fingers and do. That's why the US Constitution has so few amendments and why amendments are added so infrequently. So, because those of us whose parents and grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents were here, were brought here, we are birthright citizens. That means we are not immigrants. We have the right to be American citizens based on the fact that we were born here and our ancestors were born here. So, like I said, I did not think that anyone did not understand that. It's a very fundamental thing. But what that makes you do is pause and say, okay, you're telling me that the majority of Hispanic and Latino people believe that Black people are immigrants, and that some of those people voted for the current occupant of the White House because they thought he was going to remove Black people, not them. And so that gets us back into a conversation that we started with the Juneteenth episode about wanting to punish other people as long as you're okay. That you don't care what happens to anyone else as long as it doesn't happen to you. And that is where America is right now. That people are willing to throw other groups and other races of people under the bus if that means their family, and their people will be okay. And I don't know that this is a place that we as a country can come back from. I remember as a teenager and as a woman in my early 20s hearing about my generation, about Gen X being the me generation, being selfish and only caring about ourselves and being yuppies and wanting to make money and all this other stuff, which we can debate another day whether that's true or not. But now this really is the fruition of that thought process. And a lot of it has come from millennials and from Gen Z. It has not come from Generation X. And so, with the younger people in this country feeling like, I'm going to get mine, screw everybody else, I don't care, we're in a lot of trouble, folks. And I mean a lot of trouble. So I just wanted to clarify why Black Americans who've been here for generations are not immigrants, and why the administration has started in terms of deporting people with Spanish and Latino people and not with Black Americans. Some people have asked me what I think the possibility is that Black people will, at some point in the next few years, be the next targeted group for deportation. Again, that is not going to be easy. This process that they've undertaken with Spanish and Latino people has not been easy, but it has been made easier in some cases by the courts. Now, what do I mean by that? The Supreme Court ruled a few weeks ago that the administration was within its right to remove TPS, and let's clarify what that means, temporary protected status, from 500,000 Haitians, Venezuelans, and Cubans. So what that means is those people who are affected no longer have temporary protected status, which would allow them to stay in the United States, and that the administration can move forward with its plans to deport them. It is not going to be nearly that simple with Black Americans. Why? It goes back to what I said earlier about birthright citizenship. We are American citizens. There is no question. There is no doubt. There is no, we can argue about whether you're no, we are American citizens. So in order to start deporting us to who knows where, because most of us have no idea where our ancestors' were stolen from, they would have to make some fundamental changes to the Constitution, including changing birthright citizenship. If Congress decided at some point that birthright citizenship was not an automatic situation, that would change the whole game. But again, that is a long, complicated process. And I would not put it past this administration to try. I'm not saying they won't try. I believe they are capable of anything. I honestly do. But whether that's going to be successful or not, I doubt it. Now, that doesn't mean, clearly, that they can't, in the meantime, make Black people's lives in America as hellish as possible. They are getting rid of DEI. They're screaming about critical race theory. They are removing the names and accomplishments of Black people from government websites and government tourism sites. They want to erase Black people from America. Now, will they be successful in that? Absolutely not, because we are clear on our accomplishments and what we've given and donated to this country. And by donated, I mean blood, sweat, and tears. That's what I mean. So there is no America without Black people, regardless of how the current people in charge want to view us. So I want everybody to, when you hear these topics being brought up, to step back and ask yourself, is this actually possible, whatever they're trying to do? And if it is, can they expand it to existing citizens, or is this something that is going to be limited to this population? I want to thank everybody for listening to this. This has been a serious topic for the week, but I wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page with this. If you are not subscribed to this podcast, I encourage you to do so. There's a button just below my head where you can subscribe. You can be notified when I upload every week. I try to do a long form video and then also a short form video on a weekly basis. There will be some weeks where it will only be the long form, and I apologize for that, but some weeks, some days you're the pigeon, some days you're the building. It's that kind of thing. But I really do want to encourage people to subscribe. And if you enjoy this podcast, also please pass it on to your friends. I'm looking to gain listeners and really get into a dialogue about how people feel about things. So thank you again for listening, and I'll see everybody next week. Take care.